Welcome to Dive in the Podcast, your favorite podcast about all types of diving, scuba, tech, free diving, and more. We cover it all. Every week on Monday, we post new episodes filled with diving news, interesting dive topics, environmentalism, and much more. This week, we're talking photography. We spoke with one of our Halley famous underwater photographers. If you've seen a picture of a seahorse in Nova Scotia, you've probably seen his work. Our feature interview is with Lloyd Bond. Before that, we chat about seafloor microplastic. And a little later in our Think Blue segment, we'll learn about responsible photography. We'll talk about a dive product that could be the crazy future of diving, or maybe not. And we'll have a book recommendation from Nick. April will have a safety tip, and we'll learn who we should follow next on social media. Before we get started, let me introduce our hosts. First up is Nick Fisher. Thanks for being here this week, Nick.
Thanks for having me again, Justin. Looking forward to our episode this week.
Always a pleasure, and me too. I'm looking forward to it as well. Nick Winkler, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Justin. I didn't think I was going to make it tonight, so I'm happy to be here.
April, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. My first episode from Ontario quarantine.
What a crazy world we live in.
What a crazy world.
So before we go too far along, guys, I'm going to got a little journal article to talk about here. An article published recently in the Journal of Science describes how microplastics have been found in the deep sea floor in greater quantities than ever before. We all know about the garbage patches on the surface of the ocean, but they say that only accounts for about 1% of the suspected plastics in the ocean. The research team sampled a portion of the seafloor and found 1.9 million microplastics in just 1 square meter. That's a significant amount of plastic, and those pieces of plastic are all 5 millimeters in length or less. So they found that there are these hot spots underwater for microplastics, and they're where underwater currents flow and mix. And this one specific one in the Tyrrhenian Sea in the Mediterranean, west of Italy, was just totally full of it. An interesting finding, though, is that a large part of the plastics were from textiles and clothing and not from larger pieces of plastic as previously suspected. So the bright side of that is we might actually be able to do more about stopping that stuff from getting into the ocean. We also don't know, though, where that is in other places, if it's the same or different. The downside is that there's life, teeming on the bottom of the ocean floor, and there's small organisms like bristleworms. They're living in and eating through and ingesting this stuff. And then, of course, they get eaten by bigger life that then gets eaten by bigger life. These areas are active fisheries for bluefin tuna, swordfish, and grouper. And so those are all kind of like apex predators, so they're getting all that stuff that's been eaten and passed up. We'll link to the Guardian article as well as the original journal article in the show notes. So if you want to read that, it's pretty interesting, and you can take a look at that for yourselves.
An interesting note with the microplastics. There's a friend of mine that was doing research in Winnipeg at the University of Manitoba on microplastics, and she was telling me that there's microplastics in pretty well everything now, which was kind of disheartening. You're trying to limit your plastic use, and there's plastics in the laundry and any of those microbeads that are in any of the face cleaners or shampoos, conditioners, or anything like that. All of these plastics in them, but her research was on snails and their ability to digest microplastics. And I haven't checked in with her in a while, but hopefully there's some good news there that there are some organisms that are able to digest this stuff.
Yeah, maybe reach out to her and see if she'd like to come talk on the show about that. Who knows?
Absolutely.
Put her on the spot. We'll put her on the spot right now.
Absolutely.
Come chat with us on the show. Unnamed person in Winnipeg.
Winnipeg lady.
One of the Winnipeggers.
Winnipeg science lady.
Yeah, Winnipeg science lady, please come on.
Shout out to all our fans in Winnipeg that do science.
I'm sure she's actually brilliant, and I'm insulting her, but
Oh no, she's easily one of the smartest people I've ever met. But yeah, no, yes. She's
forever
I'll have
Winnipeg
to check in with her and
lady.
See. Yeah,
definitely. Speaking of people from back home, we've got our own local celebrity, Lloyd Bond. Nick Winkler, you sat down with him for an interview, right? Well, I guess you didn't sit down with him, but you called him up and chatted with him about photography.
That's right. I had a chance to look him up, and we hadn't actually touched base in a while. And I've been meaning to go diving with him since I got back last fall. And with me not getting my dry suit in time and the pandemic and everything, I really hadn't had a chance to connect with him. So it was really good to be able to sit down and do an interview with a really great photographer that's based locally, self-taught guy. Yeah, awesome to sit down and chat with him. I'm happy we can feature him here on the show. Yeah, I mean, the reason I kind of wanted to chat with you, because you're kind of like the underwater photography guy of all the divers around, right? That's kind of what people know you for a little bit. Is that fair?
Yeah, I guess that's fair. I mean, there's lots of other guys that even I look up to around here, but yeah, no, I definitely like doing my thing.
Yeah, maybe that's my bias view of the situation. Maybe tell me a little bit. How long have you been diving?
So I've been diving for 24 years now. I originally picked it up to do sea urchin diving in Canso when I was probably around 20 or so, and just kind of kept it up from there.
So would you say the diving came first or the photography?
Oh, definitely the diving. Yeah, the photography didn't come until probably about 8 years ago when my wife got into diving, and then at that time I was kind of bored with diving, and I said, geez, maybe I should get a camera, and that at least it'll give me something to do while I'm underwater.
What did you start off with?
So I started off with a Olympus Tough camera, and I think it was only good for like 33 feet and 4 megapixel or something like that. Took terrible photos, but nevertheless, it was really fun.
That's kind of interesting because a lot of people sometimes get into like photography with equipment that's maybe not the best for the environment, or maybe you buy early into the technology and like you say, you get like horrible photos. Like, what kept you going? Because I mean, I would have thought like at some point somebody might get discouraged and go like, this doesn't work.
I did take quite a few with that, and I got maybe a couple good ones, and I was like, wow, maybe I should kind of upgrade, right, and see if I can get something a little better. And so then from there, I went to a Sea Life, I think it was like a DC 1400, and I got a strobe, and I done all kinds of reading up on the internet and stuff like that about, underwater photography. And so, yeah, I got under with that, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, my pictures aren't blurry, and, they're actually lit up a little bit and stuff like that. So it just kind of went on from there.
You would consider yourself like a self-taught underwater photographer then?
Oh, yeah, definitely. When I first started, I mean, I didn't know the difference between a compact and a SLR camera. It was just a camera to me. So
it's pretty sweet, yeah. When passion sort of drives the hobby. So I mean, I know it's like it's challenging. Sometimes it's just frustrating. Like the equipment can be expensive, and sometimes you go out, you want to get a shot, and it just doesn't turn out how you want to. So what's your favorite thing about underwater photography?
I just kind of like the challenge of it. I like that it's something that not too many people can do. So it's, and it's very rewarding when it actually does turn out the way you want it. You get to show everybody, and that's probably my favorite part about it.
Yeah, it's definitely nice to get a sweet photo at the end, right?
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite piece of gear, whether it's scuba photography, that like helps you with your photography?
Just recently, it was probably it's probably my cheapest piece of gear, and it helped me out quite a bit. It was actually an old paint roller, like just 4-inch sleeves. And so what I did is I cut the end off it, and I basically turned it into like a little pointer stick. So what I could do is if I'm doing macro photography, and if there's, say, a nudibranch or something on a piece of kelp or something, I could bring it right into my camera and kind of keep it steady as I take a photo. Or if I'm in mud, I can kind of stick it down in mud and kind of stabilize my body so I'm not kicking the mud up, and use my camera.
Cool. So it's like a little tool. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah.
But yeah, I use other things too. Like I'll use a +10 subsea diopter if I want like a real good magnification and focus light and stuff like that.
Yeah, and all the technical stuff. I feel we could do like a whole chat just on the technical stuff.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah. What's your like macro or wide angle? Like, what's your favorite and why?
Definitely macro. I just find it a lot easier. I got a couple settings that I put it on, and off I go. And it takes a lot of patience and stuff. But I find wide angle, especially around here, it's just really challenging with the visibility and stuff. And I definitely haven't mastered that yet.
Yeah, I mean, you know that like I take underwater photo like freediving mostly. I mean, I do it on scuba, but I just got my dry suit. I got underwater once, and then we got locked down.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've done mostly on freediving. I tend to do wide angle, but yeah, it's definitely a lot more challenging to do wide angle in this environment.
Yeah, for sure.
I find like if you go somewhere like somewhere shallow, I think I went down to Prospect Village under the wharf there.
Yep.
And like if it's clear and you get some nice rays of light, that you can get some really cool stuff.
Yeah, exactly. When it's clear, shallow, early in the morning, you get some nice photos.
For sure.
Yeah.
Do you have you had any close call with like say wildlife or with your equipment while you're doing underwater photography?
Not really. I mean, I've done a lot of diving with Chris Harvey with the torpedo rays, and there's a couple times where they kind of put the sand over themselves, and they can blend in quite well. So there's a couple times I almost touched one of those suckers, which wouldn't be very good because I think they generate 220 volts of electricity. So but other than that, never really had many close calls or anything like that.
And you haven't flooded your gear yet?
Oh yeah, twice in 1 year.
Ouch.
Yeah, I managed to save my Canon T3i, believe it or not, and I mean it was completely submerged in salt water. And what I did was, I went to the closest store and I bought a gallon of water, spring water or whatever, and I just cut a hole in the top of the container and dropped my camera inside of it, which is really hard to do, but it was already ruined in my opinion. And so anyways, I did that. I let it soak for about 40 minutes, and at that time I thought it was done, so I just kind of put it in rice and went to dry it and hope for the best. Meantime, I bought another one on eBay, and right around when the one on eBay arrived, I said, well, I might as well check my old one just to see if it worked, right? And put the battery in, and sure enough, it worked. So I ended up with 2 cameras.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
At least you had a backup for that first one then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Cool. So I'm going to put you a bit on the spot here, in the sense that like it's going to be a trick question. What's your favorite photo that you've ever taken, and can you describe it?
It's probably one of my seahorses photos. It was just kind of like a fluke shot because usually I use a strobe, and for some reason my strobe didn't work, and it just came with the natural light, and the sun hit it just perfect. And it's definitely one of my more favorite photos.
Awesome. Where did you take that?
That was on the backside of Petty's Head where nobody goes, where it's all muddy and shallow and stuff. And it was probably 2 years ago, September, October, something like that.
That's cool. Yeah. Is there any particular marine animals that you love shooting? Like anything that stands out?
Yeah, mainly for me, the tropical fish, just because it's different and I haven't seen it before. So every fall I usually find something that nobody else seen around here. So that's definitely one of my favorite things to shoot.
Keeps things exciting. Those are the fish that kind of come up with this Gulf Stream a little bit, right? In the the currents. Yeah,
Gulf Stream, I think, and warm water and stuff brings them up. And I think there's a lot more of them around than what most people realize. You just gotta, like, a lot of them will arrive like in a juvenile state. So they're only the size of a quarter or a dime or something like that. So they're pretty hard to see sometimes.
It's kind of whack to see a warm water fish like show up here in the summer, right?
Yeah, exactly. The coolest one I got last year was actually a queen triggerfish, and he was the size of I'd say $1. And,
wow.
It was a little hard to identify at first, but it was pretty cool.
That's pretty sweet. I guess with the macro, right, that kind of forces you to look more closely, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Is there any like location or species that's kind of on your bucket? Like, do you have a shot that's on your bucket list that you kind of want to capture one day?
Nothing specific. I just like to shoot everything and anything and kind of hope for the best.
Fair enough. Like if you had just started off, what's one piece of advice you kind of wish somebody had given you just starting off? Like, let's say you were going to give a piece of advice to a new diver.
Probably my advice would be to look up, there's a website called The Aquatic Eye. I think it's by Dave Heidemann.
Okay.
And if I had known that, if I had watched his episodes right from day one, I would have learned so much more. Like it took me forever to learn some of the basic things, and he explains everything in detail from start to finish, and it's a great show to watch. Yeah.
Cool. That's it. Yeah, I'll gonna. Is that online? You say?
Yeah, it's on YouTube, and it's called The Aquatic Eye, and it's by a guy named Dave Heidemann, and he covers absolutely everything.
Well, I'll throw in a link in there for people. I haven't heard of that one, so I'll be sure to check it out myself. So, I mean, right in the beginning, you said there's other people you look up to. Is there any specific photographers that you kind of look up to, either locally or just internationally?
Yeah, mostly for me, it's just locally, like Bob Semple. I'm sure everybody's heard of his photography, and Harvey Morash, and Chris Power. He's an awesome photographer. Like, they're all great wide-angle photographers, and, I'm still trying to get my photos somewhat close to theirs.
Practice, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Any next projects, steps, or new equipment upgrades you have in mind?
No, nothing really new. I mean, I just upgraded a little bit of lighting and stuff for my macro photography. I put a teleconverter on my 60mm macro lens to give it that extra magnification. So I actually got out in February and got a few shots of some shrimp with it, which was pretty cool. You can almost zoom in on his face, or a 1-inch shrimp. You can almost zoom right in on his face. So that was pretty neat.
Cool. Do you manage to so the teleconverters? You have enough space in the housing or in the?
I think I ended up buying a port just a little bit too big by accident, actually, and so it turned out worked in my favor in the long run.
If anybody wants to kind of see your photographs, is there anywhere where somebody can see them? You have a website or Instagram?
No, just go on Facebook and start scrolling through my pictures. They're, I'm pretty sure I leave everything open on Facebook, so anybody can just go there and go into my albums and
just look for Lloyd Bond.
Yeah, and I got a lot of stuff on the Sea Wolves and in their photo section as well.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to interview you and then people can't see your photos. That'd be be kind of mean.
If anybody sees me out with my camera and they want their photo taken, by all means, come up to me. I'll be more than happy to take some photos. Other than that,
awesome. Yeah,
because I'm always looking for something or somebody to take a photo of, and sometimes you just don't know. Like you see divers, and when you start taking photos and hitting the flash and stuff, you don't know if you're pissing them off or if it's something that they actually like, or so yeah, if you see me underwater, just come up to me and I'll take some photos.
Cool. That's very kind of you. Yeah, it's nice when you have a piece of gear and you can grab a good photo. People usually appreciate that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Cool, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks, Nick. That was an excellent interview there.
Yeah, it was actually one of my favorite interviews that I've done. I've done a whole bunch of research interviews and talked to people over the years, and that's probably one of my favorite ones to do.
I just love Lloyd. Like, I thought that interview was just it was so Lloyd, I listened to that the other day, and like, he's so humble, and he's like, oh, I'm not even comparable to the other photographers in Nova Scotia, but I mean, his photos are incredible. Like, if you look at his underwater photography, it's just incredible. And he's always willing to take photos, which I think is really cool. I remember one time we went on a club dive, and it was right when I got my pink mask. He's like, April, that's a really cool mask. Can I take some photos of it? And you're like, whenever someone offers to take photos of you underwater, you're like, oh my God, yeah, like, that's awesome. So, no, I love Lloyd. He's an awesome guy.
Yeah. Totally humble, excellent photographer.
Yeah, so
all around nice guy. Yeah, definitely a good guy to have in the community. Nick, you also had some tips for responsible photography this week, right?
Today for Think Blue, we're going to stick with the theme of underwater photography. One of the things that you find with photography, it's a tool, and it's that tool gives you a bit of responsibility because you can do things with it, you can show things with it. And as an underwater photographer, for a lot of people when they first get into it, it's a lot of learning, a steep learning curve, and trying to understand how the camera works and how light behaves underwater. It's a whole different game underwater. So, thinking back to another Think Blue segment that we did recently, buoyancy control is really important. So you don't mess up the bottom, you don't run into wildlife, and you don't destroy the ecosystem, basically. And it's kind of same thing goes for photography. You want good buoyancy skills so you don't you can minimize your interactions with the environment, so to speak. But also as a diver that has a camera in hand, you have a responsibility for how you take pictures. You often see people touching coral reef to take pictures. You often see pictures of people standing on reefs or on wrecks, things that we normally wouldn't do, but yet they are captured on camera. So as a diver, that's perhaps one of your responsibilities, not to entertain those kind of shots. And then if you do inadvertently take one, especially with social media where people like to copy things that you're doing that may look cool but aren't actually good for the environment necessarily, it would be a thing not to publish those photos. And also, on a more positive note, when you see things underwater that are really cool and you take great pictures as a photographer, you have the ability to educate other people, right? As a diver, you already have access to an environment most people don't get to see. And with a camera, it gives you an extra tool to showcase what you see and raise awareness for things that may be issues, like underwater pollution or bad diving behavior, for example. Not necessarily that you want to go around snitching on people, but with the imagery that you create, you can raise awareness and you can empower people.
Those are excellent tips for responsible photography, Nick. Thank you very much for sharing. And Nick Fisher, you have a product review for us this week.
Yeah, for sure. So this week's segment is on the Hydroid, which is made by AquaBreather. It's a Russian company based out of Moscow, and the concept here is a full face mask rebreather system, which seems to be the first of its kind in terms of innovation. I don't see a lot of these or kind of replicas out there. The breathing system works by using a reactor containing 2 regenerative cartridges and counterlungs, which scrub CO2 and add out oxygen, like a regular rebreather. There's a 6-liter tank that goes in the top of the helmet that's kind of underneath the casing. We'll link off to to their website so you can kind of get a good look at this thing. So it's a little hard to picture without actually looking at it. And from what I can understand of the helmet, that 6-liter tank on top is used for buoyancy compensation, which was a little bit funny that's what they're using there. But other specs of the helmet it has an estimated dive time, which is advertised to be around 60 minutes, although that's kind of hard to, predict. A lot of variables there. And it has a maximum operating depth of 42 meters. It's said to be retailing, or supposed to retail once it comes out, at $4,000. I don't know if that's in dollars or rubles, actually, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. It still seems to be in sort of the research and development phase. From what I found online, they have one working model. I don't know if that's been updated in a year, but I don't know. The whole thing seems a little bit sketchy. It's kind of hard to know what to make of the system. I mean, I'm sure everybody, if you wanted to go take a look, the helmet itself looks like the alien's head from Alien vs. Predator. I guess you got to fit a whole rebreather system in this thing. So, I mean, they've painted it up to look kind of cool, but I mean, there's only so many shark or flame designs you can put on a weird looking helmet to try to cover up how dumb it looks. They also say that you can dive cold water, but I can't honestly see how you could possibly put, I don't know, a hood on. Like, it's open at the back. Like one of those, like the snorkeling masks the full face snorkeling masks you see everywhere now. Mm-hmm. It's exactly like that. There doesn't seem to be any sort of bailout system. So if you're actually doing a 60-minute, 42-meter dive, would you really trust this thing and not bring scuba with you? I don't know. It kind of is along the lines of the spare air tank that people seem to really like, that you can inflate with a bike pump. I don't know. It just seems like a bad idea. If you have particular use for it, then maybe. But I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts on this? Any comments? Like, would you actually buy this?
I mean, I'd try it in a pool.
It's like the Darth Vader helmet. That's like
Yeah,
what it
it's
looks like
huge.
to me. It's the Darth Vader helmet.
Yeah, I mean, my opinions are all literally all over the map on this thing.
too.
First of all, I think it's cool. I always like new technology. So when somebody comes out with a new technology, I'm kind of interested. And those regenerative cartridges have been used on subs to create oxygen in case of emergencies for decades, apparently. And so that's not a new technology. It's something that's like researched and tested, and that's cool. But what I literally just realized is this is just a rebreather in a helmet. So like, why make this weird pop can oxygen generator thing when you could just literally like have a oxygen tank that does the same, makes I'm sorry, I'm stumbling all over the place here, but like does the exact same job and is like, doesn't require new technology, can be filled at any dive shop, and maybe doesn't make it cost $4,000.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, it's like there's not much about it on the internet other than a website, a couple of videos, and a couple of interviews maybe the people have done, and maybe there's more stuff available that's not in English that we're not aware of. But I also think it'd be kind of cool to have one of the inventors or the inventor as a guest on the show. I mean, kind of hear more directly from them rather than coming up with our own opinions.
From what I've seen, maybe one of the points of making them in cans is that they were going to be retailing the regenerative cans at about $30 to $40 a pop. So I haven't gotten a Pure O2 fill lately, but what would the price point be for a rebreather? Like, is it comparable?
I mean, like that 6-liter tank that they're filling for buoyancy. I guess that's to be able to fill your BCD so your floaty head doesn't float away.
I guess.
So a tank that size, is under $20 anywhere I've ever been. So like, it's got to be significantly cheaper just to use some oxygen.
Yeah, I don't know. There seems to be a lot missing with this, and I'm not entirely sure. I mean, what's the point? They say on their thing that it's not scuba, but it's not your traditional rebreather.
Well, then that worries me too. So is this like, this sold to, like a rebreather where you have to take a course for this helmet before you can buy it? Or is this just going to end up as a like viral Facebook ad that is going to be tried? They're going to try to sell that all the non-certified scuba divers of the world, that those same guys that, like you mentioned, are interested in buying the bike pump, snorkel extender, bail, spare air knockoffs.
The hookah. Do you remember? I think that's what it was called. And you like dragged it along.
See, now this is another thing. Like, that is another normal technology that's like out there already that they've been using. They've used gas powered. They kind of call those SNUBA systems, right? Or hookah systems. That have supplied air from the surface for a long time, and you drag it along. Like, I've known people who've had like legitimate uses for that. I've known people like on sailboats and stuff who don't want to drag tanks or worry about having to refill their tanks. They just have this little compressor. So having an electric version of that makes sense. What doesn't make sense, again, is selling that to the general public with no scuba certification, no safety protocols, no nothing like that.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm most worried about things like this, because otherwise I'm all for new technology. And if I just got to put on a hat and go diving in the future, I could be okay with that, But if I got to put on a $4,000 monstrosity that uses a chemical reaction in a canister just because it's cool, maybe not.
Yeah, that's a good point for sure. So one thing that I was considering when going over all of this was, my initial feelings are just really resistant to the whole concept from,
Right.
how it looks to like its purpose. But I kind of got wondering, if this was how other people felt when there was new developments in the dive industry just in general. Was there an old timey equivalent to some podcast back in the day talking smack about the first designs of the Aqualung? Like when you're going from, pretty clanky with dive suits that are all surface supplied by the dudes with the cranks, and then compressed air on your back. Well, that's just going to kill you, they'd say. Like, I don't know if this is just the first design, and it's hard to tell where the line between innovation ends and idiocy begins.
Is definitely a thin line, and sometimes hard to see. So
I mean, it's definitely an interesting product. I think we're often not used to change. It's easy to sort of dismiss something as crazy wild, especially if it seems so futuristic, because it definitely looks futuristic. It's when you look at some of the product images on their website, it looks like a free diver wearing this massive futuristic helmet. From a tech perspective, I think people are always innovating, and it seems like they're using some technology that already existed, like some of you guys have mentioned, and maybe just miniaturizing it. It's kind of easy to laugh off and say, "Well, this is never going to work." I don't know. I think, maybe give somebody the chance. Obviously somebody's putting a lot of work into it, putting a lot of thought into it, and I think that's the way technology works, right? You'll have 10 people come up with an idea, and only one of them will stick, and it might not be for the reasons that you think that tech doesn't stick. It could be a training thing where people don't get a certification. It could just be the cost. It could just be this is way too wacky and weird, that sort of thing. I mean, I have maybe my reservations about it, but I think it's cool. I think new tech is always neat. I think diving, is with anything else, innovation is important. So it'd be kind of cool to see where they go and see what happens. And I think I'm the kind of person, the kind of diver in any case, that if I got my hands on it or had an opportunity to try it out and go for a dive, definitely go for it.
Well, we'll see. We'll see if it hits shelves in Halifax. We'll give it a try with some supervision.
like I said, I'll definitely dive it in a pool. Maybe one of the future years in DEMA. I don't know if they'll have any trials in that pool they always have.
I think they did that last year. That was one of the videos I found online, so you can go check that out on YouTube.
Oh, there you go.
We should link off to that as well.
An excuse
Maybe
to go
if,
back to Vegas.
If DEMA runs this year, if COVID doesn't stop it, maybe we should all go and we'll do a podcast live from DEMA.
Live from DEMA on the show floor
Yeah.
at the Hydroid booth.
Yeah, and I'm sure we're not the only one that have questions, right? So I think it'd be nice to say, hey guys, look, these are all these things that people are thinking, but can you set the record straight?
Yeah, there you go.
It'll be a huge hit.
I'm so certain that DEMA's not going to happen this year that I'll say okay.
I'll jump on that as well. I'll take that bet.
All right. Are you so certain that you'll pay for us all to go?
I'm not that certain. I've got plane tickets for September to Vegas, so we'll just have to change that to November.
That's right. It's not a big deal.
Well, thank you very much, Nick. That was a fun product review. I look forward to doing more of those with you in the future.
So do I.
Awesome. Mr. Winkler, it's time for you to tell us about your book recommendation this week.
Today's book recommendation is an ebook called Photographing Wild by Paul Nicklin. Paul Nicklin is a Canadian conservation photographer. He's done a lot of work on the Arctic and around the world. But if you've seen any of the ice images of wildlife in the Canadian Arctic, chances are that is some of his work. He has an ebook that runs about 122 pages, features about 16 different lessons on how to take better photograph, how to take compelling wildlife photographs. And not all of it is necessarily underwater, but it applies also to how you may frame a photo, how you may tell a story about the underwater world. And how to become a better photographer overall. As an ebook, I thought maybe I'm always a little wary what an ebook might be, whether it's a little bit gimmicky or not. But it's really, I found it to be, it's got a lot of beautiful images. I found it really interesting just to look at, but also tells you some things that you might not know about taking wildlife photographs from somebody that's been doing it for a long, long time and has really sort of maybe set the bar, so to speak, on that kind of photography. And real world tips that you can use. It's available online for US $20. Digital download. It looks really great on an iPad. It's actually meant to be viewed on a tablet. So I highly recommend that if you're interested in photography, and we're kind of continuing the photography theme here in the episode. So definitely a resource I would check out if you want something that's reasonably inexpensive, accessible, and especially during this time where you don't have to wait for it to ship out with postal delays and all of that.
Definitely going to look to see if I can download that and check it out. April, what is our safety tip this week? It's not more knives, is it?
No more knives this week. My safety tip this week, it's actually not a piece of gear. It's knowing your limits. And I think that's actually something that is pretty important, is knowing your limits. I think all too often we see people attempting dives that, they just aren't ready for. And that's how you get hurt. And I mean, as an instructor, I'm not telling you to not try to advance, but I'm telling you to be smart about your advancement in diving. So, if you just got your open water last weekend, you're probably not going to want to attempt a 100-foot dive with your safety stop in mid-open water. So, all these things are just knowing your limits. If this is your first dive since open water, maybe you want to meet up with a buddy who has been diving for a little bit, and you just want to go for an easy 40-foot dive. And even as instructors, we know our limits. This is how we got to this point. We just slowly make our way up. I think Patty does a really good job with having lots of courses available to help you with your advancement. And something that Justin told me once was, you're only as good as your worst buddy. So if you go diving, whoever is the worst diver there, that whole, and I don't want to say worst diver, but I guess least skilled diver, who's ever the least skilled is, that's what level you're all at. So you should not be diving to the highest skilled diver. You're always diving to your lowest skilled buddy. And it's something to keep in mind. Always dive within your limits.
Yeah, that's it. How many times have you seen somebody push their limits because they didn't want to slow down the group, or I didn't signal that I was low on air because everybody else had plenty of air, or, there's so many of those things that have happened in the past. And I just wish people would, I can't tell you one time who told me they were out of air on a dive first. You know what? When somebody says they need to turn around and go back, perfectly fine with me. Who cares?
Me too.
For sure.
And there seems to be shame that comes with being the first person to be low on air, which I never really got. Because if you're low on air, just tell us and we'll turn around. I don't think anybody's ever so personally, I can make an 80 last 2 hours. Probably because I'm small, but I can go on that thing all day. So most of the time I'm waiting for someone to say they're at half a tank because I'm ready to turn around. So it never really bothers me.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, personally, again, I would much rather have a diver tell me that they're out of air or that they don't feel comfy on a dive, and for whatever reason. I mean, there's the old adage that you can call a dive for any reason, no questions asked, and I truly believe that that's a really important thing. I'd much rather be told just hey, I don't feel good about this dive, than have to do CPR in the middle of a bay, towing somebody back to the beach to call 911. I'd much rather just turn a dive or be you know what, I don't feel good about this one. Let's go back to shore.
Yeah.
100% rather do that surface swim back or come back up than, have to put everybody else through that, Yeah. So, I mean, you can kind of check your pride at the door when you're doing diving, and that's kind of one of the things that I like about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, most people too, when we're diving together, we're just going for fun, right? So for most of us, just getting out is good. So whether that's just an easy 30-foot dive at Patty's Head, or that's, your 120-foot dive at Birchie. Like, for me personally, honestly, I enjoy both of those dives the same. I'm just happy to get out.
Yeah, I just want to be, zen underwater and not think about stresses of work, bills, children, whatever the case may be. and just you can't think about anything underwater. I just want to be there. That's it. I don't really care though if it's a 30-minute dive or a 35-minute dive. Like, who gives a
Yeah.
Silly.
Exactly. So that's my safety tip this week. Dive within your limits.
Great tip. Great tip.
Yeah,
Yeah,
excellent
that's
tip.
my tip.
Excellent tip. Do you have a social media follow for us too, April?
I do have my social media follow for the week. I was trying to find the exact name for us on Instagram here, but for some reason my phone doesn't want to load. But it's just Mari's. And the reason I'm saying Mari's, kind of like last week I was talking about Bear Sports, but Mari's is another really cool brand with a lot of really cool brand ambassadors. One of their brand ambassadors that you can look up, her name is Ivana. And she's like a super cool girl. And I know I talk about girls that scuba dive a lot, so trying to focus more on Mari's here, but she has photos from everything of her, like diving in the tropics to tech diving to cave diving to ice diving. But Mari's, they have tons and tons of brand ambassadors that do all sorts of those things. So if you just go to Mari's kind of main page, they feature like all of those guys on there, and you can kind of follow them. But Mari's, like, when you follow their page, like, not every post, they're not trying to sell you something on every post. A lot of it is just promoting diving and promoting different sites, promoting different divers. So I'm a big fan. I really like their social media.
Yeah, they're at Mari's Just Add Water.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Justin.
No problem. Google knows everything.
Sure does.
Awesome. That sounds like another excellent tip. And it's okay if you like women that scuba. There's lots of excellent lady scuba divers that do not get enough airtime in the world. So keep on. Well, that's it. We flew through that episode. I don't know how long this episode's been so far, but it felt fast. That does it for yeah. It does it for today for the episode, guys and lady. Thanks, Nick Fisher.
Thanks for having me, Justin.
Anytime. Nick Winkler, thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm really glad I can make it. This COVID-19 schedule has got me really, really busy, so I'm glad I could be here tonight. Thanks, everyone.
And April, thanks for being here too.
Thanks, Justin. I look forward to...
All the way from Ontario.
Yeah, I've been listening to the podcasts when I've been working out, and I've been studying them, so I look forward to studying this one this week.
Yeah, I mix ours in there when I'm driving around. I always have podcasts on, and I listen to ours in there too, just to see if how they feel mixed in with other podcasts.
Do you find it a little bit cringy to listen to your own voice, though?
I sit here and edit my voice, and I hate it so much.
Oh my god!
I couldn't imagine doing what you do.
I've been listening to them like when I'm on the treadmill. And, like, every time my segment comes on, I just, like, die a little bit inside.
So, April, you'll like this because I was putting my daughter to bed earlier, and I was like, Susan, I've got to go. I've got some work to do. And she's like, are you going to do that thing where it's like video, but it's only sound or something? And I was like, the podcast? And she's like, yeah. Is that the thing where you introduce yourself a lot and then you go to April for a safety tip?
I'm glad Susan knows my segment. So exciting.
It's the only thing she knows. I introduce myself and throw it to April.
That's Susan's dream show.
Hi, I'm Justin. Here's April's safety tip.
And thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I'm gonna do a super cut of just your segments, April, so Susan can be extra happy with that.
We'll make
About my
Susan
daughter, for
podcast.
everyone listening. Yeah,
Yeah.
for everyone listening, my daughter is a huge fan of April's. So I haven't broken it to her that you've moved out of the province. Oh my God.
You haven't told her yet?
No, I can't.
But you
can't
know
tell
what?
her.
Like at the same time, since it's quarantine, she'll never know. Like,
Right, exactly.
she hasn't seen me anyways. So just tell her at Christmas. Like,
April moved away a long time ago.
yeah, it won't hurt as bad then. Like,
Yeah. During
April's
the
been gone for
virus.
months.
Just off to the farm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We're off to the farm.
Just like the
and-
family dog. Yeah. April went to the farm this week.
Brutal.
And there's the name of the
gosh.
episode.
Yeah,
April went to the farm
went to
this
the
week.
farm.
Yeah. Right.
We sent April to the farm like the family dog.
Yeah.
Terrible.
So, yeah, the folks listening, I'm glad you've made it all the way to the end of the episode so that you can learn where the episode name came from this week. It's my favorite game.
So confused.
All right. Well, thanks, April. And you guys can follow the show on Instagram and Facebook at divein.thepodcast. That's a period, not the word dot. You can email us at diveinthepodcast@gmail.com. You can follow me at idiveok. April is April Weichert. Nick Winkler is at Nicholas Winkler Photography, and Nick Fisher is at scuba_406. You can find links for everything we mentioned today in the show notes or on our website, diveinthepodcast.podbean.com. We'll see you next Monday when we speak to a dive resort owner in Dominica. We'll talk everything from the state of the scuba industry to underwater photography. We'll be speaking to Simon Walsh. This episode of Dive In the Podcast was brought to you by our sponsor, Torpedo Ray Scuba. Head over to your favorite podcast app to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It's very much appreciated. Thanks for listening.